My name is Steve, and in this video I am going to show you a few ways that I use 3D printing to enhance my coffee making experience. So the goal is to take you through how to use 3D printers for everyday life. How can I use them to enhance some of the things I do, and in this case it's going to be making coffee. I'm going to show you some accessories that I've printed. I want to show some enhancements that I've made to make coffee making a little bit more enjoyable. So let's get right into it. So the way I'm going to approach this video is taking you through things that are maybe a little bit easier to do and progress into things that are more customizable, that I've created myself. And by that, I mean, what are things that I can go out online that other people have created 3D models that I can download and print and just use them as is. That's as easy as it gets. A little bit harder is starting to create my own 3D models. So using 3D modeling software, create my own customized models that I can then print out on my 3D printer. So the first thing I did was I wanted to come up with a tool for the espresso machine. And I could go buy this online, but it's called the WDT Tool. It has some needles. It's used for smoothing out the coffee grounds on your espresso. And so I went out online, and I'll put links to all of this down in the description. And someone already had a WDT tool that you can twist apart. I don't have any needles in this, but it fits 4 needles. And what I really liked about this was that it's a 2-for-1 3D printer enhancement. Number one, you print it on your 3D printer, so you come out with an object, but it uses the cleaning needles, your nozzle cleaning needles, that are an accessory to your 3D printer. And there's a cover that goes over the needles. The needles fit inside these 4 holes, and there's a cover that screws on top. And while this model worked, did everything that I needed, I had a few things that I wanted to customize, that I wanted to make it a little bit different. And so one of those was it has all these little knobby finishes on it. And I don't particularly care for that. It puts a lot of strain on your 3D printer. It's a lot of small movements of the head back and forth, and I really didn't feel it did anything to enhance the object itself. So I wanted to get rid of those, make everything smooth. The other is when I put the needles in that I had, they went below the holes, and the cover wasn't holding them in place real tight. So I created my own and really modified the STL files that I downloaded for this. So I made it smooth. I'll have some close-ups. I have the needles now in this. And I ended up cutting out some of this inner part of this holder to get it so that the needles would stick out just a little bit. I added some extra to the top of this, and now when I screw this on, it rests just up against the top of the needles and they stay in place nice and tight. And you'll see later, as I am making some other objects, how I incorporate this cover into some other objects. But there's a WDT tool. Download, print it out, it worked. Customize it a little bit if you want to, and you have your own WDT tool that you don't have to purchase. So the next object, as you've seen from the video, is a cup riser for my espresso machine. So I have these shot glasses that are used for the espresso, but when I put them on the machine itself, they're a little bit low and away from the portafilter, and sometimes you want it raised up to be a little closer. So I made an object, and this is one that I made myself. So 3D modeling software, and if you look at anything that I do, I'm very functional in my 3D prints. I use a lot of primitive objects, boxes, cylinders, nothing special, and I do a lot with Boolean. So I create a box, I fillet the edges, I take and, mimic the size of the cup so it would fit in there, be centered underneath the portafilter. And it's just a pretty simple, basic object, but really easy to use, centers itself, holds the cup, and is kind of fun to make. So this is where making your own objects can be a lot of fun, and you want to make them to, think about what you're doing when you make it. So I cut out a lot of these holes because you don't want to use as much plastic. So it's a way to save plastic. But I also cut holes through the top, so when I remove the cup, the portafilter, if it's still dripping, is simply going to drip down into the drip tray, and it's not going to get onto my 3D print. So there's little things that you start to learn as you do your own 3D modeling, and again, just adds to the enjoyment of the overall process. So let's start the next one. So my portafilter holder was a little bit more complex. This is one that I had to do a little bit more design work because I went from an octagon base to a circle, so I had to do some lofting, had to remove out some of the objects, and I had to really figure out from the portafilter how it was going to fit but still mount onto these three different areas that extend out from the portafilter to hold it into place. So this is where things get a little more complex. You've got to get all the right dimensions of the portafilter, model the portafilter head itself to create your custom mount. I also wanted this to have a little more weight to it. One of the things when you do 3D printing with plastic, things tend to be very light. So I created a spot in the bottom to add some weights that I had purchased, and they're just double back tape onto these weights to give it a little bit of weight to hold it down. And so now I can take my portafilter, instead of having it tipped on the counter, I can slide it in, it holds in place. I made it fit so that I can pick it up, but yet it comes out very easily. I have my dosing ring that fits right on top, and now this makes it much easier to manage the grounds, tamp, and take this out and put it into the espresso machine. So let's move on to the little bit more difficult one, and the one that takes a little more creativity. So this one is really fully custom made, and it's an accessory holder. So as you saw from some of the time lapse, I took all of those accessories that I had from the espresso machine, from the Aeropress, and typically what I would do is just make models of the things I need to cut out to make them fit. And I took a little different approach to this. I actually took the time to model all of the different accessories to the full extent. Helps me get better at 3D modeling, makes it easier to truly see the layout of all the objects. And I really enjoyed taking a little bit of extra time to create all of those for future use as well, depending on what other accessories or different types of mounts I want to create. So as you saw, this now becomes a way to get all of the different accessories from all the different equipment into one manageable space that I can move around my counter, decide where I want it to go, and it just makes it much easier to keep everything organized. And the one thing I did want to show is how earlier when I went through the WDT tool, what I did, this has a screw on top to fit in. I took the base, added it to my accessory holder. So now my WDT tool fits and I'm still able to screw it into place to hold it. So you can take downloaded STL files, incorporate them into your object so you don't have to recreate everything from scratch. And the other fun thing with 3D printing and coming up with your own designs is the iterative process of making improvements, coming up with ideas after you've already done something, and how do you make things better? So I thought, wouldn't it be neat to go back and create individual accessory holders that could be joined together and a little more modular. So this will hold all the accessories. I have one that's separate for everything on my espresso, goes on one, everything for the Aeropress on another, and I have an additional hand grinder that goes on another. And the way I'm going to make all this work is they're actually held together with magnets. So I incorporated into my model where I could glue some magnets into place. When I want to, it will snap the two together and hold them in place. And if I want to rearrange things, I can. I can separate them on my counter. I can put them together. And again, just a neat way to come up with that ongoing improvement of the ideas and things you have. So I hope you enjoyed this video, maybe found it helpful. For me, this has made my coffee making experience much better, everything much more organized, and I really enjoy the fact that I was able to customize and create this. So please subscribe, helps the channel out a lot. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, and I hope to see you in the next one.